everyone. I want to welcome everyone to our June Lunch and Learn, part 4 of our Get Fit series, where today we're going to talk about health monitoring. And we have Jeremy Robbins with us. Jeremy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And he is the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Therap Services. Prior to joining Therap, he worked at the U.S. Embassies in Poland, Romania in their economics, environment, science, technology, and health sections. At Therap, he is involved in a variety of projects, including their marketing, digital transformation, and building the Therap Global Community. So we're delighted to have him, and we're going to turn it over to him. I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, put in there, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A at the end.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. I am excited to be with you all today. I think I might just go full slideshow mode. Let me know, Dean, if you're able to see everything properly. And
That's
we'll
good.
get started. Okay. So hi everyone. I got to remember to look into this camera, not the one where I see myself up there. It is great to be with you all. Like Dina mentioned, I am going to be talking about the world of smart health devices. And I'll just start with some, just our Therap Connect disclaimer and our retention of rights, a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So we'll start off by just reiterating some of the things that you probably already know, which really is why there is this need for automation and need for automation really with smart devices and how they can assist in that. We'll explore what this world of automated data collection is. One of the things that I always enjoy is getting to share types of devices that you may not have even known existed. I think a lot of people are used to smart watches. A lot of people wear Apple Watches or Fitbits, but there's a whole host of other devices that are out there. And so we'll talk a bit about those. And we'll also talk about what things providers really need to consider when they are thinking about automated data collection. It's really straightforward to think about these devices in terms of how they can practically impact and improve your own health outcomes, or to think about it for family members. But um, for providers, there are a lot of other things to consider that we have spent a lot of time at Therap considering. And then we'll get into some of the practical impacts. I'm not going to make this like a Therap sales pitch. That's not what this is intended to be. But we will use just sort of some of the tools we're working with as real world examples of how providers are using smart devices and are having that improve the ways that they are providing supports, and we'll explore those. And then lastly, we'll talk about the future. We'll talk about where all of these devices are going and how these can have such transformational impacts for all of you. As I'm going through this, we will have a question and answer section at the end, but please feel free to ask questions. I always find that it is a lot more fun getting to interact and answer questions as I'm going through. Otherwise, it's a lot of me just talking straightforward, and it's good to have a little water break with some questions. So hopefully you'll ask questions, and this should be a lot of fun. So in terms of that need for automation, what we are seeing across the country, I'm sure this is the case in Florida, is that there is a huge issue when it comes to staffing. This is from the NCORE report of the State of America's Direct Support Workforce Crisis, but 90% of agencies reported seeing moderate or severe staffing challenges in the year of 2024. And almost 40% had to really discontinue or impact their services due to that inability to meet required levels of staffing. And additionally, the turnover and vacancy rates in that DSP workforce just continue to grow and grow. According to NCORE again, it's around 40% nationally. And with such high turnover, that means we really need to be doing whatever we can to help simplify the work of DSPs. and to help make sure they are spending as much time as they can on the most impactful parts of service delivery. And so to the extent we can remove the documentation side off their plate, not only will that hopefully help save them time and make them like their jobs more, because I don't think anyone's favorite part of their job is the documentation part, but it will really improve outcomes for folks because it lets the DSPs focus on providing those more impactful elements of their jobs. And that is at the core of why automated data collection. It's a question I get a lot. Automated data collection can be so impactful. Number one, it helps to promote privacy and independence for individuals, for clients, for consumers, however you talk about the people that you support. I think a really clean example of this is if you think about someone that is sleeping, and normally in this industry, the way that someone would be documenting someone that's sleeping is through bed checks. It means someone's opening the door, potentially waking that person up and trying to get a sense of are they awake or are they asleep. Well, what if you could replace the bed check with a sleep mat underneath the person's bed? And that way, all that person needs to do is sleep just like anyone else would. And you can collect all of this data on how well they are sleeping in a way that is much more privacy preserving, in a way that is not requiring someone to open the door, walk in, and see how they're sleeping. So that is a big piece of why automated data collection is impactful. It also helps with more accurate and transparent data collection. If you consider the idea of someone that is going to take someone's temperature and then their blood pressure, and then they have to answer some phone calls and give someone their meds in the morning, and all of a sudden they've forgotten what time they entered something in, or they've forgotten the right number. This is a way to help you get much better data when you have the data flow directly from the smart device into your documentation portal. And then, like we mentioned before, saving time to maximize that human connection. That really those three, I think, are a lot of what our guiding North Stars are when it comes to automating data collection. I like to start this conversation typically by just talking about how automated data collection can help yourself. If any of you use, for example, smart watches or smart rings, you'll know that these devices can tell you so much more data about yourself. If you think about running around a track, you'll probably find out how much you've run, but you can have all of this data in terms of your heart rate, how many calories you've burned, other significant health information that can really impact your day to day. There also are reminders and other notifications that these devices can provide. I'll give you a story. One of my coworkers, he uses an Aura ring, which is a type of smart ring. And so the Aura ring will tell you information about how well someone slept, and every day it gives you a readiness score. And this is my coworker David. So one morning he woke up and he had a really bad readiness score. And the Aura ring was basically saying, hey, it looks like you're feeling a little bit run down. Just if you look at your biomarkers over the last couple of days, it's trending towards you really are not at peak performance. You should try to take it easy today. And he sort of disregarded it and he did not take it easy. And he ended up a couple of days later having a pretty bad um, cold. Like, and he was just knocked out for a week or so. And so these are the types of things where it's not just here's a bunch of data, it's giving you actionable insights. Another one that I've experienced is I'll be sitting at my desk all day and I'll have a Fitbit that'll say, hey, it's you haven't taken the requisite number of steps for the hour. Make sure you stand up and take a few steps around. So when you think about using data collection for yourself with these smart devices, a nice thing is you can have those reminders and those notifications of, hey, take it easy, or hey, let's make sure you're being a little bit active. Really helpful when you think about collecting data about yourself. The last one is automating data, automating actions based on data. So if you think about, for example, Dexcom and other continuous glucose monitors, what they're even able to do is say, okay, we are noticing your glucose levels are falling. We are going to automatically administer insulin. And there are other smart devices that are similar where you are automating actions based on data. So now let's think about not just using it for yourself, but using it for family members. What you have here is an example of a smart toothbrush. So there are toothbrushes that are out there that will collect data on how long someone brushes their teeth for, how well they're brushing their teeth. Some of them will even give you a map of someone's mouth, and I'm happy to talk more about toothbrushes if anyone has follow-up questions there. So what's really nice about that is if you have a child or maybe you have an aging relative where you get is more independence and autonomy. And you also get time savings because you have to spend less time doing that sort of monitoring. So, for example, one of my coworkers who has little kids, he got them smart toothbrushes as some testing we were doing with Therap, and he was able to see that, wait a second, you guys are not, one of his kids was just not brushing their teeth well enough. And he would say, hey, did you brush your teeth well? And they'd say, yes, I did. But he could see that they were only brushing it for about 10, 15 seconds. And so he had to sit with them and do some training on, okay, here's how long you have to really brush your teeth, try to sing happy birthday, some of those tips. And after that, he saw those scores begin to rise, the duration of the toothbrushing begin to rise. And it meant instead of him having to spend time every morning and every evening looking over his kid's shoulder, he could trust the data that he was getting from that smart device. So when you think about it, layering it on for family, that's a great example. Another one is for aging relatives. This is something we actually installed with my grandma is fall detectors, where someone can have a bit more independence because you have a sensor or a detection device that is wearable, looking out for those falls. And potentially those are triggering alerts, so letting people know, hey, this person just fell, we need to check in on them, or sometimes they're even able to call emergency services based on the actions on the device. So that's where you get layering in, not just for yourself, but thinking about family members as well. So now we think about just all the world of these possible devices. And I'll talk about some of the ones that you might be familiar with, some you might be less familiar with. So this is just basic health data monitoring. So things like smart scales. And what's a new trend in the smart scale world, I don't know if any of you ever used it, but it's a body composition scale. So a very common type of scale, you'll see them at certain gyms, or some people even have them for their home bathrooms, are these body composition scales. They're called BIA scales, bioelectrical impedance analysis scales. You step on the scale, and what it does is it sends a tiny electrical pulse up one leg, through your torso, and then down the other leg. And based on how fast that data sends, it's able to pick up on how much of your body is muscle versus fat versus blood versus bone. And it's giving you this whole picture of body composition that's much more impactful than just saying, here's someone's BMI. So there's smart scales, smart thermometers, blood pressure monitors. Um, like I mentioned, smart toothbrushes are one that I think people might be less familiar with, but can be a great tool if you're trying to understand how yourself or a family member are brushing your teeth. And then those continuous vitals monitoring or continuous glucose monitoring also just give you so much data. And you can really have a lot of takeaways from those data. There's also lifestyle monitoring, which is less strictly health, but if you think about something like a smart sleep mat or a smart watch, some of the common brands for those, if you aren't familiar, you have Apple, Garmin, Fitbit are common smart watches. Smart rings, you'll have the Aura ring, which is spelled O-U-R-A. That's for people that maybe don't feel like wearing a watch. I know for myself, I'm not a huge watch person, and so the ring just felt more comfortable for me. These are also, the smart rings are typically able to give you a little bit better of a reading just based on the way the sensors are positioned on the finger compared to the watch being positioned on the wrist. So those are some lifestyle monitoring ones. Another one is environment monitoring. And I think that these devices are going to continue to grow in terms of how they can be impactful and how they can help people be informed about how they live their lives. So for example, what you see on the screen is a room sensor. And what you can see people start to think about is how elements in their environment can impact their health and their wellness. So for example, if you know the noise levels in a room or the temperature or the air quality or pollutants, you can start having that data interact with the data from a sleep mat, for example. And you can learn, okay, when I go to sleep and it is 72 degrees, I do not sleep as well as when I go to sleep and it's 68 degrees. And you can start combining these different devices to really build a robust sense of what is the best way for someone's environment to be to achieve the health and wellness outcomes that they're looking for. And I'll talk a bit more about that later, but I personally think that's a really exciting potential with all of these smart devices. Before I get into the considerations for providers, does anyone have any questions that have come up so far that I could help answer?
So I don't see any in the chat, but if anyone wants to unmute and kind of ask some, please do so. All right, well, I think you're good to continue.
We'll keep on going. So what we've talked about so far is using devices for yourself, using devices for people that are members of your family, but what happens when you're suddenly using a smart device for service provision? And this is where you get into some really significant considerations for providers. Because if you are using a device for yourself, that's one thing. But if you're having someone use a device and it's part of their service delivery, all of a sudden it is PHI, it's subject to HIPAA, and you have to worry about caseload management and user permissions and activity tracking of the data and all of those other HIPAA implications surrounding data collected by those smart devices. And the majority of those device manufacturers are designing them for general consumers. They're designing it in a way that makes it really easy to see information about yourself or to set up a family profile. Like if you use Netflix, you can have a family profile. And as long as you're not on different Wi-Fi's, they'll make it very easy for you to see different members of the family accessing Netflix together, right? It's similar with a lot of these devices. They'll go, okay, we have a family profile, or you have your friends' accounts, and you can see how different people are doing. You can have step competitions. You can see how your kids are brushing your teeth. But when you're using this in service provision, all of a sudden you have questions like, what happens if you need half of the staff at the group home to see information about someone and half of the staff to not be able to see that information? That is much trickier, and it's not what these device manufacturers are really thinking about. And so when you're considering using smart devices at your agencies, that is something that you really want to think about. Also, questions of who owns the smart devices. Let's say you buy you have a sleep mat for someone in the group home, and then they move out of the group home. Does the person get to keep the sleep mat? Does the sleep mat stay in that person's bed? And it's more like the bed is the one that controls the sleep mat. It's going to depend on how they're purchased, depending on where the funding come. One of the ones for Therap that we've seen is there's a lot of questions about what devices work best for this field. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So we know that something like a smart ring may pose choking hazards for people that have pica or are just prone to putting things in their mouth and trying to swallow them. Another one is smart scales. So those body composition scales, typically they require you to stand on the scale a little bit longer than an analog scale because they're doing all that sort of body composition reading that takes about 5-10 seconds to run through. And in this field, that means it might not work for someone who doesn't have the patience to stand for that long on a scale, or who does not have the stability to stand without moving a little bit on the scale. So one of the questions I would really recommend is before you implement a smart device across the whole agency, do some trials and see, does this device work for the populations that we work with? Does this device make sense? And what you'll often find is there are some people that it's a great fit for, and there are some people that it might not be as good of a fit for. I'm a huge fan of the smart sleep mat. It'll go underneath the mattress. You're able to get all sorts of data from it. But there are some people we know that spend half the night sleeping in bed and half the night they want to go onto the couch and sleep from the couch. Or they're just prone to seeing a cord coming out of the mattress and unplugging that cord. And so knowing the people you support and knowing what will work for them is so significant. Another piece is how are you going to manage all of these devices? So if you have a Fitbit and a smart sleep mat and a scale for yourself, already you're probably starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. I know at home I have way too many remotes for the different smart devices that I have. And half the time you say a word and it triggers Siri and then it triggers Alexa, and there's all these different smart devices that are out there. It can be overwhelming for one person or for one family. But what happens when all of a sudden you have to manage large numbers of devices because you're using them across different group homes or in different day services? So that is something else that you want to think about. How are you going to manage the battery levels or making sure that they're not somehow mysteriously leaving the agency or getting broken? The last one that I'll throw out there is one that I had not thought much about until we started working with providers and with these smart devices. And that is, how is the data going to flow out of the device? So for example, Apple Watches, those are Bluetooth enabled watches. And in order for that data to send, you need to have a phone, and it needs to be an iPhone in the proximity of the Apple Watch for that data to send. So in contrast, something like a Fitbit, that could be used for an iPhone or a non-iPhone. There are other devices that send data via Wi-Fi, which means you can sync it up to your agency's Wi-Fi and you don't need to have a phone or a tablet in the area. And that's something that I would really recommend thinking about when you're looking at smart devices is what else is needed in our infrastructure for those devices to be successful. Does it mean every single person receiving supports needs to have a phone? Does it mean one staff member needs to have access to a phone or a tablet to be able to connect to Bluetooth? Or does it mean we can just have the data send via Wi-Fi? Because different companies will have different models for that. But ultimately, if you're able to get it to work, what I think is so fantastic is how it can benefit stakeholders across all levels. On the individual side, it's much less intrusive. You get to really have this greater sense of ownership over your life and over your health information. For the families and guardians, it's a great way for them to get more data in a more real-time way. And it also means families and guardians can even be involved in some of the data collection if you don't have to manually type anything in. Frontline staff, it's making their lives easier. For QAs and managers, you're getting better quality data. Nurses and doctors, similarly, it's saving them time, it's getting them better data. The whole the whole ecosystem really benefits if you're able to successfully implement these smart devices. And so now I want to talk about just real world stories of how these devices are impacting people. The lens that I'm going to speak about this is through the lens of Therap Connect. So for those of you that are familiar with Therap, or I should say, for those of you that are not familiar with Therap, we're a documentation platform for human services providers. And in the last couple of years, we've started this new initiative called Therap Connect, which really is this way for smart devices to send data automatically into Therap Connect, and then from Therap Connect into Therap Services. And that way, agencies can overlay their caseloads and activity tracking and user permissions into the smart data collection sphere, which is the lens that we'll use to explore this. So I want to dive a little bit more into the smart sleep mat. This is an example of a smart sleep mat. There are other ones that are out there. This is from a company that's called Withings, Withings, Withings. You can see it's very thin, it's surprisingly small, and that will go underneath the mattress for people that are receiving supports. And so I always find it helpful to really contrast it to how sleep data is currently monitored. Right now, if you want to know how someone is sleeping, what you basically need to do is have overnight staff open the door and visually see do they seem like they're asleep? Are they snoring? there's not that much data that you're able to document, and it's not a great use of your staff's time. And also, it may not even be accurate. The person may just look like they're asleep, or they may be woken up because the staff member opened the door in a loud way. With the sleep mat, this is the example of what you can get from the Withing sleep mat. So let's see, can I annotate on this? Maybe not. So what you can, oh wait, here's annotated. Okay, so let's see if this will work. So over on the left side, what you can see is this is sort of your summary of the sleep. Every night you'll get how much time someone's spending in bed, how much time are they actually sleeping, what is the score that Withings is generating for them. You'll also get data on stages of sleep. So REM, light, and deep sleep, you can see that charted here. And then on the right side, you'll get data on pulse and respiration rate. Down below, you'll also get data on breathing disturbances and snoring duration. And what is so powerful is that depending on the person, the type of data that you are looking to collect really will vary quite a bit. We've had some providers, but most of what they care about is how long and how well someone is sleeping. They just want the basics because maybe they have someone that they think is not sleeping well because they're always tired, and they actually want to confirm that hypothesis using a sleep mat. Other times, maybe what they have is a person where they're really trying to get a sense of whether they are reaching a deep level of sleep. There was a provider that I was talking with that's in Maine, and they support someone who has been they've been receiving support for decades. They used to live in some of the institutions in Maine, and they're on all sorts of medications for behavioral issues. And they started using the sleep mat, and it turns out the person was not sleeping more than 30 minutes at a time over the course of the night, and they were never really reaching deep sleep and barely even sustaining REM sleep. So they were getting very light sleep and very little sleep, and they would not have known that if it were not for the sleep mat because it was something when the staff would do the bed checks, the person typically seemed asleep. They weren't catching them during those brief moments of being awake. And they took that data to the doctor, and the doctor was like, oh my gosh, we need to really reconsider what medications we have this person on because we thought there was behavioral issues for one reason, and it turns out there are all sorts of problems with this person's sleep hygiene and sleep. And we need to be addressing that. And it's possible the medications are actually making that worse. So that might be something that you're considering. I think the breathing disturbances and snoring duration is another great one. I had a coworker and he would snore a ton. He had a CPAP, and every night you could see about in the middle of the night he'd wake up, and when he'd go back to sleep, he would forget to put his CPAP on. And you could see from his pulse and respiration rate, and you could see from his snoring duration that moment of waking up, coming back to bed, and not having his CPAP on. And so he started using the sleep mat and he was able to see, okay, look at how much this is impacting my quality of sleep. I really need to be more deliberate about making sure I'm putting my CPAP back on. And what we've heard from providers is they are using this data to justify having sleep studies, to do retraining for people to make sure they're using their CPAPs. And so those are the types of hands-on experiences that you can have with that sleep mat. What we've tried to do at Therap is just condense this into a daily note for staff. So if you think about a DSP that's supposed to work with someone during the day, this way you know how well they slept prior to interacting with them for the day. And just if you think about that for your agency, what that means is you know if someone slept really well. Maybe it's a great day to be a bit more active or a great day to work on some of the goals that you've been working on with your ISPs programs. Or maybe it's a day they really didn't sleep well and it's just, you want to take it easier or provide supports in a uh, a gentler way to avoid certain behavioral issues. I know for myself, if people could know which days I slept really well and which days I didn't sleep well, I'm sure they would have a much better understanding of why I was interacting with them that way that day. What we also try to do is just give you an agency-wide view. So if you think about not just with Therap, but for anywhere, what you'd want to see is a way for your nursing team or your house managers to view everyone in one place. So you're not having to go into all of these unique different apps to see that information. And just to give you a story from a real sleep mat user, this is someone who is an agency that has a combination of residential and day program services. And they had someone that was always very sleepy during the day. And they were like falling asleep at the day program and they talked to the person. They assumed it was because they were not sleeping well. But they started using the sleep mat and they found out that actually the person was sleeping quite well. And they took that data to their doctor. And as you can see here, it turned out one of the medications was causing that drowsiness. And there's more to this quote, but basically what they said when they were talking with us is since we switched medications, it's like a whole new person. They are just so reinvigorated compared to where they were before. And then, another story from the same agency, they had someone where they always had a hunch that when they had a certain staff member on shift, they slept better. But it's one of those hunches that they didn't have the data to back up. And they started using a sleep mat. And based on the data, they could see, okay, actually, we can see when this person has a certain staff member working an extra shift, they do sleep better. And so they were able to change their staffing based on that sleep data. So that's the type of person-centered, data-driven changes that you're able to make with this sleep data. Next one that I just want to again share some real examples of are the body composition scale. So to give you a sense of how this will work, you'll collect data on weight, and you can see it charted here, but you'll also get data on muscle mass and fat mass, hydration, bone mass. And this I think was just, I thought it was a wonderful story. They this is an agency that works with someone who was really did not enjoy having their weight be taken because what it meant was they had someone looking over their shoulder and they were sensitive about their weight. And so it was a source of tension between them and the staff because they just did not want that experience of stepping on a scale and having someone look right over their shoulder. Um, and so then what they started doing with the sleep mat, with the scale, is they were able to step on the scale in the privacy of their own bathroom and have that data send without the staff overseeing it. So it's a way to really promote that privacy for folks. Let's see, I think we had a question about how is the sleep mat funded? Does Medicaid cover this product? So there are different sleep mats that are out there. We happen to be working with Withings sleep mat, and I'll type that in the chat for you. Um, the Withing sleep mat is not Medicaid funded to my knowledge. What most providers are doing is either the individual themselves is paying for it, or they're using like spend downs, or the agency is paying for it. We've also had a number of agencies that are using assistive technology grants in order to cover the cost of these smart devices. So I don't know what Florida has specifically, but we know for a while there was ARPA funds, and even still there's other assistive technology grants that are out there, and people are using that to fund some of these smart devices like the sleep mat. I guess let me go back. Any questions on the sleep mat that I could help answer? Any additional questions?
I don't see any others in the chat, Jeremy. Up there is one. Is Therap Connect's main purpose for institutions, group homes, doctors, or is this meant for personal use also?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with Therap Connect, what we are doing is we are connecting to different smart device companies. So for example, we connect to Withings, which makes the smart sleep mat. If you're looking to use it for personal use, I would recommend just going on the Withings website and you can buy a device for personal use. What we are doing with Therap Connect is it's mainly service providers who want to manage data for a number of different people in a way that is HIPAA compliant. But if you're just looking to use it for yourself, I'd recommend just going and working with the smart manufacturer's website yourself and You can get a sleep mat. Like I, for example, have my own Wittings app and I use that for the sleep mat. So it's great to use for yourself or to use it for your family. With Therap Connect, what we're serving more as is like this portal for the data to be sent into for people that are providing supports. All right. Okay, so we'll keep moving on. Um, the vital signs piece of things, if you think about just how many different readings someone typically has to take, the ability to grab a thermometer, scan someone's head, and assign it directly on the device to someone they support. They don't have to type anything in, they don't have to write anything down. That data will automatically send. And what's really nice is typically it'll be time stamped. So you'll know this is exactly the time that this reading was taken. So it's getting you higher quality data in a way that's going to also save your team time. In terms of continuous monitoring, this is a chart just to show what the Fitbit data can look like. So we collect, for example, data on pulse, where every single minute you can see what someone's pulse is. And if they have an activity goal that they're looking to reach, or if you're concerned about certain stresses, being able to see that granular data can be really impactful. And just thinking about Fitbits in general, let's say you have someone where you're not sure if there's certain staff they interact with better than others. If you can see that their pulse becomes elevated and they're getting more agitated when they're working with certain staff, that can measurably impact staffing decisions, which I think is really powerful. For the day, you can also get pulse minimums, maximums, pulse averages. You can get data on steps for the day and steps broken out into 15-minute intervals. So that's just how we do it. If you went with Fitbit themselves, I'm sure you could get it even more granular. This is just how their data happens to send over to us. But I think looking at Fitbits is a great, Fitbits, other smartwatches is a great way if you have activity goals for people to also include them in this process. What I think has been great is hearing from providers, hey, since we started using smart devices, the people that we're supporting feel a greater sense of ownership over their health and wellness journey. And there was someone we were talking to where they said someone had lost like 10, 15 pounds just because they had their own scale. And that idea of having their own scale and not having someone near them when they had the weights reading be taken, and also having more of this data, having data on muscle and fat made them feel much more empowered and excited about their weight journey. So I'm sure you can find similar stories with these smart watches as well. To close by just looking to the future. Some things that I think you'll see on the horizon with these smart devices is having more assistance with managing devices, having more actions that can be automated. I'll give you a couple of examples. So we have seen there are seizure tracking devices that people are working on that can automatically send notifications to relevant people that, hey, a seizure has been detected. Those are still relatively limited in terms of what device options are out there right now, but that's a type of device where they're looking at automating actions. There are other devices that are looking at smart medication dispensers that can know, okay, this time of day, this person is supposed to take X type of medication, and it will automatically dispense it. And some of those are even connected to pharmacies where they can automatically trigger um, additional prescriptions, or sorry, refillment of prescriptions. So automating actions, I think, is going to become more and more popular. And then I know this is something that we're working on. A lot of companies that are making devices are working on as well, is just how can we make this data work for you? Because what you'll see with smart devices is it can almost feel overwhelming. If you think about supporting 10 people and you have 10 people's worth of sleep data, it's a lot to expect your nursing team to dive into every single person. Or even if you just have your own, you're just looking at devices for yourself, right? It's a lot to expect you to dive into your sleep data every single night and your Fitbit data every single night. And so what companies that are making these devices are doing, what we're looking to do, is how can we identify trends? How can we present you with correlations to know, hey, when you are working out later at night and we detect that your pulse is elevated, it's leading to worse quality sleep. Or when you are eating at a certain time. I'm giving examples that my devices have told me. So this is like I work out too late at night sometimes, and they tell me that impacts my sleep score, or I'll eat too late at night, and that will impact my sleep score as well. So what these devices are trying to do is take what can feel like an overwhelming amount of data and package it down in a way that is going to make it easily understandable to you, whether you're using it for yourself, for a family member, or for people that you support. And then the other thing that they're trying to do is give you predictions. So it's not just looking backwards at correlations, but it's giving you predictions to promote better outcomes. It's letting you know, hey, if you set the thermostat to this temperature tonight, the odds are you're going to have a better night of sleep. Or if you decide to take this medication at this time of day, that's also going to lead to a better outcome for your readiness score for tomorrow, for example. And so these are just a taste of where these devices are looking to move in the future. I think that is all that I have. I hope you have some questions. I hope you found it interesting. But yes, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I would love to answer any that you have.
So don't be shy. Go ahead and unmute if you have any questions for Jeremy. We will be sending a copy of this presentation out after the fact to all attendees, and I will include his contact info. But it certainly was very informative. So we thank you for presenting. So I don't see any hand raised or any questions in the chat. All right, so here's a question from Amy. Are the sleep mats waterproof?
So so I don't want to generalize for all sleep mats because we at Therap are just working with one company. So we're working with a company called Withings. I'm sure there are other sleep mats that are out there. The sleep mats that we happen to be working with will go underneath the mattress. So it's not like they're going underneath the sheet for someone. They're going all the way under the mattress, which makes it much less likely for them to get water on them. Um, are they waterproof? I'm sure there is some quantity of water that could get on them that would damage them. But what's nice about them is they have a cover. If it does get wet, what you can always do is take off the cover and put that in the wash and then put it back onto the sleep mat. So um, I can't speak to being fully waterproof, but I know they can at least absorb a certain amount of water. And the fact that they go underneath the mattress will reduce the risk of them getting water on them.
Great. Well, again, so this was just a bunch of awesome information, and we thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. We will take a break on our lunch and learns for July and August, and we'll be back in September. So again, thanks everyone for joining.
All right, thank you all. Yeah, and if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks.